Well, we begin with breaking news. A strong earthquake in the Aegean Sea has shaken Turkey and Greece. Rescuers are searching for survivors after the magnitude 7 quake caused a building to collapse. There is no information at this time on casualties. Let's cross to Istanbul now, where we can speak with Sinem Kusioglu. Sinem, this earthquake, we understand, struck just 60 minutes ago or so. What information do you have for us at this time?
Well, according to the official information we have, according to Interior Ministry, let me say, they have reports of 6 buildings that have collapsed after this earthquake. And according to Izmir's mayor, municipal mayor, they have received the reports of 20 buildings that have collapsed so far.
A magnitude 7 earthquake has struck in the Aegean Sea between the Turkish coast and the Greek island of Samos. Several buildings have collapsed in Turkey's Izmir province, with people trapped beneath the rubble, and reports suggest at the moment at least 4 people have been killed. The earthquake struck 11 miles off the coast at a depth of 10 miles. The tremors felt along Turkey's Aegean coast, and it caused some mini tsunamis as well in many of the low-lying coastal areas there. It was centred northeast off the Greek island of Samos. Turkish media have showed the wreckage of a multi-storey building. This is in central Izmir. People climbing in to try and reach anyone who might be trapped inside, and there have been several other building collapses through pictures that we've seen coming in through this afternoon. Are you
reaching out to safety? This elderly woman was saved from a collapsed building in Izmir. And within these layers upon layers of concrete, other survivors could well be waiting, trapped, as rescuers race to find them. One day after an earthquake in the Aegean Sea rocked parts of Turkey and Greece. Most of the damage was centred on the Turkish town of Izmir. First responders had spent the night searching through the rubble, as worried family members watched on.
Kızım var burada. Kızım burada çalışıyordu diş polikliniğinde.
Almost 100 people have been rescued from wrecked buildings, and rescue workers also pulled out a cat. The 6.6 earthquake flattened several buildings, killing dozens of people and injuring hundreds more. Many families are too afraid to return to their homes, unsure if they are structurally sound, and so instead opted to sleep outside.
Yaşadığımız yer İzmir oldu. Yani biraz daha ılıman bir iklim. Bugünü kurtarırız, yarını kurtarırız ama uzun vadede de bizim de düşündüğümüz bir şey yok şu anda. Çaresiziz yani.
2 teenagers were also killed on the Greek island of Samos after a wall collapsed, and Friday's tremor triggered a small tsunami. Greece and Turkey are often at loggerheads, but the leaders exchanged words of support and solidarity in the wake of the disaster, standing united in the face of a common enemy.
We are coming on the air tonight with breaking news on several fronts. Just 6 days before the election, tonight that powerful hurricane Zeta is slamming into Louisiana at 110 miles per hour, the 5th time that has happened this year. More than 30 million Americans are in the storm's path right now, and tens of thousands have already lost power. Good evening, Danya.
Good evening, Nora. The rain and wind is intensifying here in New Orleans. Famed Bourbon Street is a virtual ghost town. That's because this storm was supposed to be a Category 1. It's now just 1 mile an hour away from becoming a Category 3.
Hurricane Zeta slammed into the Louisiana coast as a strong Category 2 tonight and is now barreling through the state. Fierce winds already wreaking havoc in Grand Isle, where residents are under mandatory evacuation orders. Officials are warning of deadly storm surge as heavy rainfall floods streets. Louisiana has been hit by 2 tropical storms and 2 hurricanes already this year.
This is not a drill. We've had many of them. We do expect directly impacting the city of New Orleans.
Residents prepared by picking up sandbags today.
You can't get tired of it. You just have to adjust yourself, and this is life.
This morning, coastal communities waking up to devastation yet again.
We've got a 2-foot swell in here.
This time, Hurricane Zeta, a Category 2 storm pummeling the already battered Louisiana coastline. The fast-moving hurricane made a beeline for New Orleans and never wavered, rolling in with wind gusts topping 100 miles an hour.
Although we have made it through, we have been damaged. We have been hit.
The destructive winds and heavy rain soaking the Gulf Coast from Louisiana to Alabama, including Mississippi, where cars were swamped in this Biloxi parking garage. Trees toppled, boats tossed inland, and countless homes all taking a big hit from the 11th hurricane to make landfall this year, a record.
It was kind of scary for me.
Zeta's rapid growth seen all the way from the International Space Station, swelling to a near Category 3 just before making landfall. In New Orleans, extra floodgates were shut as early as noon on Wednesday, hoping to thwart the inevitable.
You've got a number of different systems that have to come together to work to keep New Orleans safe and dry.
People here exhausted by the relentless storm season. The city of New Orleans tweeting, "I would like to cancel my subscription to the Hurricane of the Month Club, please."
That's everything?
Robbie Orgeron owns Felix's Seafood Restaurant in New Orleans. He's had to close 9 times this year.
This is by far the most challenging, stressful year yet.
A region beaten and battered by Mother Nature, ready for 2020 to finally end.
When is it going to stop? When is it going to stop?
Good evening. Right now, a line of severe storms is lashing the southeast, flooding roads and properties.
We have reporters in all the hardest hit suburbs where residents are picking up the pieces.
From early afternoon, starting out west, the line of spring storms started rolling in towards the east. This is the supercell brewing near Warwick, a funnel cloud forming. At this home in Esk, the gardens turned to a cascading, muddy mess.
All of a sudden it was pouring and I looked out the window and went, oh my God, my garden's going.
The ominous clouds delivered these hailstones and a huge deluge. In just 1 hour, 70 millimetres fell at Upper Lockyer, 62 at Helidon, 48 at Calbar and 80 millimetres at Beechmere.
We have a good chance of at least achieving our average rainfall for Queensland this season and even potentially getting above average as we move through spring.
The deluge causing flash flooding, this driver ending up in the thick of it at Woolloongabba, swallowing this entire intersection down the road. And at Kedron the local park's now a splash park. Outside and inside, a torrent running through this Wavell Heights gym, the University of Queensland inundated as well. Up in the clouds, planes were forced into holding patterns west of the city, waiting for a break in the storm to land. The brollies weren't great, but the rain was good. The grass watered, and like here in Caboolture, the tanks are full. While in the city, this bin chicken took the chance for a much-needed bath. Alex Heinke, 9 News.
From tropical storms to those wildfires which are raging in the west, forcing tens of thousands to flee their homes. Kaylee Hartung joins us now from the fire zone in Yorba Linda, California. Good morning, Kaylee.
Hey, good morning, Michael. We have watched this fire climb this hillside. There is very little separating these flames from the neighborhood below and hundreds of homes. Fire crews have been working overnight, and now police are going door to door here telling people it's time to go.
Overnight, multiple wildfires exploding in Southern California. Hurricane force winds driving these flames in Orange County as 150,000 residents are warned to evacuate.
We have not experienced a wind event like this. So combining that with the year-round fire season and now the winds, we're definitely up against it right now.
The most severe Santa Ana winds this year, with gusts over 70 miles per hour, grounding firefighting aircraft.
Until these winds die down, this fire is unstoppable. Red flag warnings will continue.
Fire crews forced to battle the blazes on foot.
Countdown 1.
Just outside Los Angeles, the Silverado fire quickly engulfing more than 7,000 acres and critically injuring 2 first responders.
They're gravely injured. We ask that everybody keeps them in their thoughts and prayers.
Red flag warnings leading authorities to shut down power for thousands of customers, potentially impacting more than 1 million Californians.
Now, those red flag warnings are going to continue through today from southern Oregon over to western Arizona. Here in Southern California, we don't expect to see winds as extreme as we saw yesterday, but in these dry conditions, any wind could continue to spread these wildfires.
An air transfer of a COVID patient in France illustrates how serious the situation is as hospitals start to fill up yet again. Tonight, in an address to the nation, President Emmanuel Macron ordered a second nationwide lockdown.
J'ai confiance en nous, en vous.
I have trust in us, in you, trust in our capacity to get through this challenge, he said. All non-essential businesses will be closed starting Friday, but schools will stay open. Anyone leaving their home will need signed documentation. It's an emotional roller coaster, says this man. I'm a bit sad, but I can still understand. Germany is also taking a new hard line today. The country avoided the worst of the pandemic's first wave, but officials say it's beginning to lose control and are ordering a partial lockdown. These are tough measures we agreed on, and they are burdensome, says Chancellor Angela Merkel. Like France, all bars and restaurants will be closed for 1 month, and people are urged to avoid unnecessary travel. Deaths across the continent rose nearly 40% in a week, a worrying number for the European Commission president.
We are all in this together. No member state will safely emerge from the crisis until everyone does.
But some restrictions are sparking protest. In Rome, there were clashes with riot police as Italy hit a new daily record of 25,000 cases. And the Spanish government is sending a message. This may go on for some time, extending its state of emergency for 6 months. It will be reviewed on March 9th and then again in May, says Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, who hopes this move will help stop the contagion curve, a goal shared across Europe and most of the world right now. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, London.
The wave of new cases in Europe is forcing France and Germany to go back into lockdown. France's president said last night the new spike would be harder and deadlier than the first. Germany's chancellor said this morning that the country's hospitals could be overwhelmed in a few weeks. Elizabeth Palmer has more.
Enjoying the last few hours of freedom with friends, Parisians watched their president deliver the bad news.
Je compte sur chacun d'entre vous.
Emmanuel Macron told the country a new lockdown had to be a brutal break on rocketing COVID infections. As of midnight tonight, bars, restaurants and non-essential businesses will close until December. Those schools and factories will stay open. But police will check that anyone out on the street has a good reason to leave home. Planes have been flying severely ill patients to hospitals in other parts of France that can take them, and more than half of intensive care beds are already full. In Barcelona, restaurant workers protested against closures in Spain that have thrown many of them out of work. But there's no chance European leaders can ease restrictions now with more than 1 million new infections over the last week. That's nearly half of all new cases on Earth. Even Germany, where masks and, above all, efficient testing had kept the infection rate low, is risking losing control. For the first time, a partial lockdown there will close restaurants, bars, and movie theaters until December. Now, here in the UK, large areas are already under very strict lockdown, but the infection seems to be skyrocketing anyway. So scientists and even some politicians are saying the only thing that's going to slow it down is a national lockdown. Anthony?
Very discouraging. The coronavirus pandemic is raging again in Europe, and new rules are going into place to slow it down. That's led to violent protests in places like Italy. Europe now reports nearly half of the world's new COVID cases, 1.3 million just last week, an all-time high. Seth Doan is in Rome. Seth, how's that country responding to that?
Well, Anthony, there are new rules and regulations. For a while now, we've had to wear these masks both outside and inside. Now the newest restrictions include a curfew that all restaurants have to close after 6 p.m. and gyms and pools are also closed. There have been some protests, scattered protests around the country, and in some cases, various extremist groups have hijacked those protests, sparking violence. Overnight, police in riot gear fired tear gas to push back protesters that had set fires in the northern cities of Turin and Milan. While most protests against the government restrictions, curfew, and closures have been peaceful, Italy's national police tell CBS News these scenes are the result of instigators from far right, far left, and organized crime groups who've infiltrated and carried out violence. Across Europe, coronavirus cases are spiking. This chart shows the surges since September. Look at Germany, Spain, the United Kingdom, and France, which now has the 5th highest number of cases globally. Spain, the first European country to have more than 1 million confirmed cases, declared a second state of emergency. Governments and the World Health Organization are urging everyone take personal responsibility and limit contact.
We can avoid national lockdowns. We can avoid massive restrictive movements if everyone plays their part.
Those pleas to lessen community spread are also coming from Europe's hospitals. In Belgium, doctors in one city have been asked to keep working even if they have coronavirus. But overall death rates are down, and those admitted to critical care are more likely to survive.
We feel we can offer every patient the best possible opportunity to get through it, based on some much firmer science that we can draw on now.
The prognosis for businesses is less encouraging.
September was the first month for us that we started to go in the right way. So now we have to stop again.
You can see that the square behind me here, many of the streets are relatively empty, far fewer people than there normally would be. For the most part, Italians are quietly cooperating with these restrictions. And Gail, I would say there is really more fear here than anger, fear of returning to where we were at the pandemic's peak back in the spring.
Yeah, thank you, Seth Doan. I think that's what we all feel is fear.
Yeah.
But did he say that doctors, even if they have it, are told they've got to go back to work?
In one place. I don't understand that at all. But it is. I mean, I think you understand why some people are upset. It's very disheartening. In Europe as well as here, people have worked so hard to try to get through this, and to have to go backwards. It's a long fight. But this tells you this virus is stubborn and
thriving.
Yep, and will surge back if you let down your guard.
A 6 p.m. dinner curfew is pretty early in a country where they don't even eat till 7 or later.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a collective sacrifice. We keep saying that.
I know.
You got to wear your mask.
It's so hard for these businesses.
And nobody likes wearing a mask. I get that.
Yep.
The picture is changing almost daily. This morning, a further 3.5 million people will be under tighter restrictions in England. But could it all be too little, too late? So far, the government has resisted calls to abandon its regional approach, ignoring its own advisors who warned 6 weeks ago it may not work. As Oxford moves into Tier 2, there's growing pressure on the government to act now to protect lives and the economy.
I for one, would be quite keen on there being a lockdown early, so that we have a good run up to Christmas, rather than having a lockdown in perhaps a month or even 6 weeks' time, and then stifling Christmas for us, which is really what happened coming up to Easter.
Latest official figures suggest 1 in 100 people in England had coronavirus last week. That's up from 1 in 130 the week before, and follows a 47% rise in daily cases. As Birmingham, England's second biggest city, moves into the second tier of restrictions, it now may just be a matter of time before others move too. In the southwest, Bristol has the highest local cases rate in the region, prompting the city's mayor to move Bristol under a so-called Tier 1+. It's now expected that there'll be more deaths this winter than there were in the first wave. The government scientific advisors today warn there are difficult decisions ahead, but putting them off doesn't make them any easier.
England on Saturday joined a string of countries ordering a second lockdown. The UK just surpassed 1 million COVID-19 infections and is seeing more than 20,000 new cases per day on average.
The virus is spreading even faster than the reasonable worst-case scenario of our scientific advisors. whose models, as you've just seen, now suggest that unless we act, we could see deaths in this country running at several thousand a day, a peak of mortality, alas, bigger than the one we saw in April.
The measures come into effect on Thursday and are set to last until the beginning of December. People will only be allowed to go out for specific reasons such as education, work, exercise, shopping for essentials, or caring for the vulnerable. Bars and restaurants will shut except for takeaway or delivery services. English residents largely accepted the move, some saying it came too late.
It's very rushed, and we're just going in it for the sake of it when we should have done it prior to this, to where we are now.
Yeah, it was bad enough, back in March. So I think at the end of the day, we're just going to have to do it. Because otherwise, Christmas is just going to be a complete write-off, I think.
Johnson had hoped regional restrictions imposed earlier in October would be enough to slow the spread of the virus. But scientific advisors predict that on the current path, demand for hospital beds will exceed capacity by the beginning of December. The Prime Minister admitted the lockdown would be another blow to businesses and promised to extend the government's furlough scheme until the end of November.
Prayers in Nice's Notre Dame Basilica the evening after a gruesome morning. Just outside, people light candles for the 3 victims. With a terrorist investigation underway, more details have come to light. The assailant was a Tunisian man who arrived in Italy in September before travelling to France.
Il était porteur au moment de son interpellation d'un document sous forme d'un papier de la Croix-Rouge italienne au nom d'un ressortissant tunisien né en 1999.
Prime Minister Jean Castex said this was an attack on freedom of religion and raised France's security alert to its highest level.
Cette attaque, aussi lâche que barbare, endeuille une nouvelle fois le pays tout entier. La réponse du gouvernement sera ferme, implacable et immédiate.
Visiting the scene of the attack earlier on, the president had a defiant message.
Si nous sommes attaqués, c'est pour les valeurs qui sont les nôtres, pour notre goût de la liberté, pour cette possibilité sur notre sol de croire librement.
Emmanuel Macron said the number of soldiers deployed to protect schools and religious sites will be raised from 3,000 to 7,000. The country was already shaken by the beheading of teacher Samuel Paty earlier this month after he showed pupils cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. Many French politicians and citizens have since displayed the images in the name of freedom of expression, prompting an outpouring of anger in parts of the Muslim world.
It's been almost 2 weeks since comments made by French President Emmanuel Macron on Islam and on cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad have stirred anger across parts of the Muslim world. On Saturday, the president of the largest Muslim country in the world also added his voice, condemning those comments but also calling for calm.
Indonesia mengecam keras terjadinya kekerasan yang terjadi di Paris dan Nice. Indonesia juga mengecam keras pernyataan Presiden Prancis yang menghina agama Islam, yang telah melukai perasaan umat Islam di seluruh dunia.
On October 21st, during the national tribute to Samuel Paty, the teacher who was murdered for showing cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, the French president made comments on the right to caricature. Since then, there have been dozens of demonstrations against France and calls to boycott French products. For the first time since that speech, Macron expanded on his beliefs. In an interview with Al Jazeera, he said he could understand that people could be shocked by those drawings, but would never accept a justification of the violence. He added, "I consider it our duty to protect our freedoms and our rights." Other French officials have been doing damage control to try to put an end to the controversy. But this government remains deeply unpopular across much of the Muslim world.
Deja vu to 2016. Can we trust these polls? Steve Kornacki with an answer. Now, Steve, what about it?
Yeah, Chef, it's a good question, and it's worth considering. What if the polls are as wrong in 2020 as they were in 2016? So what you got here, these are the current poll averages in the battleground states, and what we did is we looked at each one of these battleground states and said, how much were the final polls off in 2016, and said, let's apply the same miss And what would that do to 2020? And you see the picture does change. You start to see a little bit more red here. Trump picks up Wisconsin, North Carolina, Ohio, Iowa. This would not be enough of a switch, not enough of a poll miss to put Trump over 270. But you can see he'd be knocking on the door. It would change the race significantly.
Of course, they can be wrong one way or the other.
Very good point. And in 2012, in fact, the election before 16, they were wrong the other way. They underestimated Barack Obama's support that year. So we also said, what if these polls are missing like they missed in 2012 on Barack Obama's support? What would that look like on Election Day? And there suddenly you see Biden starts to run away with a bunch of states. Trump only ends up with Arizona. Biden wins the lion's share, and he wins them pretty easily, too.
Yeah, Texas, really has me head scratching. We've already had more Texans vote this year already than voted in all of 2016. Do we have any idea who they are and what's motivating them? I mean, are they going left or right?
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. We could put those stats up again. You could see past the 2016 level. Demographically, our friends at Target Smart have come up with some data. They say there are, relative to 2016, a little bit more college-educated white voters in the electorate, a little bit lower right now in the non-college white. Non-college whites, the Trump base, college whites, the Democratic base. But the big question is, does that just mean that on Election Day, that Trump demographic is going to turn out more and level things off, or have the Democrats built a more permanent advantage here? The Election Day is what will tell us that.
Yeah.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.
The US election isn't a popularity vote. Who becomes the so-called leader of the free world is actually decided by 538 electors across this vast country who cast their votes on behalf of the people. So, who's an elector? Let's break it down for you. This all goes back to the formation of the United States Constitution in 1787. The Founding Fathers rejected the idea of Congress electing the president and were concerned that a popular vote would favour larger states. And thus, the Electoral College was born. The amount of electoral votes that each state receives is a mathematical figure. Add together the joint number of senators and House of Representative members. California has the most votes, 55. That's because they have 53 congressmen and women and 2 senators. The District of Columbia, D.C. have no senators or House of Representative members, but they still get 3 votes, courtesy of an amendment to the Constitution in 1961. The state votes go towards a tally of what's known as Electoral College votes. The goal is 270 to win, half of the total sum, plus 1. So campaigning is this complicated mix of targeting the states and doing the maths to work out where you need to go in order to achieve 270 votes. All of this means that the popular vote doesn't matter on a national scale. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won almost 3 million more votes than Donald Trump, yet she still lost by 304 Electoral College votes to 227. In fact, there have been 5 occasions where the winning candidate lost the popular vote. What happens if they are tied or neither get to the 270? The House of Representatives chooses the president. The Senate chooses the vice president.